I've always been considered a quiet, nice guy who would not hurt a fly. Not to sound vain, but that's what people say, which I just repeat. It's been that way since my childhood, and I feel it'll remain that way for the rest of my days. But I fear that it has been a reason for going through so much tragedy lately, as in these stories they usually give context, so I'll give a bit of mine. My name is Ivan, and I've been married for 3 years to my beautiful wife, Rebecca. Our marriage is no big deal. We love each other at times, and we spent a couple of years as a couple, but other than that, I feel like the love has been waning lately. Or, no, not really. More like I'm just saying this to make up for what I just found out. We tend to minimize things when bad times happen, don't we? Our marriage did have several happy moments, but trying as I might, I could not seem to bring them up, and that's because I just found out that Rebecca, just a day before our wedding, made out, kissed, passionately with my best friend Kyle. I found out because a cousin of Rebecca's came back from Spain, and talking to her, she confessed the affair to me, feeling like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders, not knowing that she had passed it on to me. She told me that Rebecca confessed this to her a week after the event, and looking quite sorry about it, promising just not to keep the secret from me. I think you may have mentioned that part was left out too. However, when Rebecca's cousin was talking to me, she noticed that everything was going suspiciously well with me, ever since she asked me if she had told me. I asked her to tell me what, and she explained everything. She felt very bad about doing it, but she also felt annoyed that Rebecca never was destined to tell me. I'll tell you, I'm a novelist and I do a lot of fantasy stuff, but ever since she told me all this, my mind has not been able to concentrate on anything. It goes from getting Rebecca to explain everything to writing a story about a guy who gets ran over by his lover emotionally, simply based on real events. Everything has happened as if it were a novel, and the hero is now learning of the event that begins to trigger the whole story. It's the phrase, "Your marriage is a lie." Now goes on in my head, and until I talk to Rebecca, I know it won't change. That's right, I'm going to have to talk to her because this kind of situation deserves to be talked about. If my friends were to listen to me, they would probably tell me something like I'm too cowardly or that I lack initiative, but the truth is that I'm not so much upset as sad. I also admit that I'm a very emotional person, and I avoid conflict as much as possible. So this conversation won't be all pretty and shiny. However, every time I falter, I have to remind myself why I do all this. My marriage is one of the most solid things I've ever had in my entire life, and I won't be able to enjoy it to the fullest now. Not even that. Rebecca and I were a team, and now I wonder if she's been able to live in peace all this time knowing that secret. Well, if she managed to get to this point, that has to mean something, right? Maybe she thought it was no big deal, that she would forget about it, or that it was a mistake not worth bringing up. Or even worse, that she had no regrets and would not have taken it as a small, secret victory. Like one last big fling before tying herself down to a married life. That makes me want to cry, even. Whatever the case, I know our lives will change radically after that. I wish it was all cruel prank by Rebecca's cousin, and that it was an elaborate plan to play a joke on me. But as time goes on, I become more insecure about the whole thing, and that's the worst feeling anyone can have. Update number 1. I spoke with Rebecca yesterday. She's at her parents' house as things got a little out of hand during the conversation. I initially reached out to her as calm as possible, asking for a moment to talk, and she intuitively sensed that, well, what was going on from the beginning. So she was mentally prepared for what I was about to say. I began by saying, I recently found out about something that happened years ago, and I hope you can give me your explanation and version of the matter. Rebecca began to cry almost immediately, and far from denying it or planting some excuse, she confessed everything, saying what happened that day, although it hurts a little. I know I have to write it down so I can get it all out from my system. Years ago, we were all in the stress of the wedding planning and making everything happen as best we could with as few mistakes as we could, and in a sense, we were succeeding. However, among the conversation I had with Rebecca during those days, some of her friends poisoned her mind by saying that she would never date anyone else for the rest of her life. And when we were one day away from the wedding in a bar, they ran into Kyle, my best friend, who, by the way, I have not told you anything about. Kyle has been one of my best friends since high school, and even though we have not always been together because of college and jobs, we still had a huge affection for each other. It is one of those friendships that you rarely run into, but when you do, they are like fingernails in dirt. Kyle cannot be my best man because in the early morning of the wedding day, he had to go to Canada for a bit of business. And far from being worried about his trip, he was in a bar where he found Rebecca and other bridesmaids doing their thing. At one point, the two of them came to be alone and started chit-chatting about me and the wedding. Rebecca always told me why she had not hung out with Kyle more over the course of our relationship, and although I never answered it, it's because of the insecurity that I have. Kyle was one of the guys who made women drool in high school, and that generated in me several complexes and insecurities towards me. I admit it, the guy's good looking, and I thought that by being around him, she would leave me for him. This situation did not help. Rebecca told me how it all happened, and although she did not give any details, she at least seemed a little sorry for what had happened. She told me that after they talked, he made this comment to her that she was not going out with guys anymore, and it made her panic. Kyle, completely forgetting what it means to be a good friend, flattered her with an overly low line, and he asked her to kiss him, and said that if she did not feel anything, she should not worry because her feelings were for real. I know what you're thinking, that I should just use this for my books because of the great boast it projects, but I don't know what is worse, this or that it worked. Getting a confused Rebecca to succumb to her more primal desires. Neither her version nor her cousin's version says anything else happened, just a passionate kiss. But that does not make the story any better. The fact that he is, or in the case was, one of my best friends, puts the icing on the cake. Her cousin gave me details that she did not want to tell me, and when the two facts did not match up, I started to get a little disappointed in both of them. I did not know if one of them was exaggerating to make her cousin look bad, or if the other one was beginning to have the most unnatural desire to deny everything to the last word. Either way, it didn't matter. The point was that she made out with someone else right before our wedding, and that's something almost unforgivable. After we talked, she said that she would be out of the house for a few days and even apologized to me and walked out the door. I have to admit that for me, it was like seeing her for the last time, and I was not seeing the girl who cheated on me, but the woman I married and who was faithful to me for all these years, to the point where I convinced myself that it was a mistake, and that was it. Of course, I'm not ready to forgive something like that, heck no. In a perfect world, I'd even call Kyle and ask him what happened, but the truth is, if there's any place in my mind and body that can hold so much anger, it's when I think about him. He's the only reason I'm truly angry, because he manipulated Rebecca's mind and took advantage of her weakness. She told me that under other circumstances, she would never have even thought of going to the party because it would only lead to trouble. And here we are. I've decided not to write to her, but eventually, if I don't hear from her, I'm going to start breaking zero contact. I feel like tonight is going to be one of the hardest times I've ever had in my life. And to top it off, I'm starting to realize that this is the first time in 3 years that I have not let Rebecca behind. I'm not a big fan of that feeling, I guess. Update number 2. This'll be somewhat of a controversial update, right? But I have decided to resume my relationship with Rebecca. Before you get mad at me, let me explain. I've pondered the decision for a very long time, but I also wanted to know Rebecca's position on this. She did not tell me the truth because, well, for obvious wedding reasons, she let the time go by and she had enjoyed it so much with me that she felt that revealing it would spoil everything now. The truth is that we did have some good times, and I had a revealed secret to me. We would not have lived through any of what we went through, so in that sense, although I live with a lie on my shoulders, my happiness was genuine. She was quite remorseful for the event and swore loyalty to me in every way. After that, considering it was her last day before she was married, is what she did something reprehensible? Of course it is, but one day after that, we were swore eternal love to each other, and I feel that promise should be kept wide open. So when she came back, we got to talking about it, and call me crazy, seriously, I noticed she was super sorry for what happened. She tells me that she cut off communication with Kyle and that nothing similar to cheating on me has ever crossed her mind. It was a, quote, moment of weakness that she's not very proud of, and I believe her. At the end of the day, we're humans and we make mistakes, but reflecting on them is what makes us overcome as people, and the fact that she married during the relationship with that regret makes me understand that it was not easy for her either. We agreed to go to couples therapy soon, like next month. Even though I would like to do it already, we're saving up for it. The anxiety is consuming me, and even though we talked about it and are relatively fine, I can't help the intrusive thoughts. Seeing her with someone else or pretending to love me or things I can't avoid no matter how fake it is. We keep all this away from the public. She doesn't know I write all this on here, and I've promised her not to divulge into my books the secret. But you already know how I am, and my best way to purge myself of all my discomfort is through words. And in case you're wondering, no, I did not tell Rebecca that it was her cousin who told me. Although maybe she sensed it because she was, I say, one of the only people that she told in her life. And I don't know if that comes as a shock to her or if she made a fuss about it. I doubt it. Although one never knows. The other thing is, I have not talked to Kyle all this time. I have not told him about it, and I prefer to avoid it as much as possible. I have not heard from him for a long time, and if I want this to work, the best thing to do is stay away from him. Otherwise, it's a matter of continuing to reflect and knowing how all this can evolve. It's been so many great years with Rebecca, and even though everything has been on a tightrope lately, I don't think that separating us is the right solution. Update number 3. I hate to come here again because this time it's something completely different from everything I've been going through. I mean, it has nothing to do with Rebecca and the kiss at all. This time it's much worse because I did something absolutely terrible. Just so you understand, Rebecca's family loves animals. Her cousins have a farm, and every home in her family has at least one dog and a cat. It's sort of a tradition, and while Rebecca is not spared from this, her side of the family has the fewest animals, and still they have a cat and dog. They're named Mr. Rufus and Minnie, and have been in the family for 6 and 10 years, respectively. When we met, Mr. Rufus was just a kitten, and Minnie was already at least 3 years of age. However, that family loves these animals almost to the point of adoring them. Mr. Rufus broke his paw a year ago, and the family spent almost $1,000 to fix it. It was something unbelievable that I've never seen in my entire life. It was cute, though, as it showed how these people treated animals like real family members. Well, I'm afraid I just shifted that balance a bit because I accidentally killed Minnie, the family dog. Let me explain. It was an accident. And all because I did not keep an eye on the food. See, Rebecca and I sometimes go to my in-laws. Sometimes for the sole purpose of visiting the animals even, and last time we went, they welcomed us with open arms and paws. Later, Rebecca and her mom went out to buy some things, and after a while they texted that they had left their wallet, so her dad went to take it. He told me I could finish this piece of chocolate cake from the fridge, as he knew I liked it, and he saved it for me. I feel so guilty writing this. So I took it and got ready to eat it. The problem is that I went to the bathroom just to pee for a second. Really, it was like 35 seconds. When I came back, I noticed how my cake on top of the large table had a bite, and I found Minnie licking her snout. Suffice to say that I panicked and ended up cleaning the plate and throwing the cake down the garbage disposal, leaving everything as it was, and I was going to call emergency, but just as I was about to do so, the dog starts to vomit in the living room. And it was powerful stuff. Amid the chaos, the family arrived, and that's when the chain of lies started. Of course, everybody was alarmed, and I told them I didn't know what was going on. Just that the dog started vomiting uncontrollably, and all at once, tying things up, they asked me if I've given her chocolate cake. But I told them no, of course not. So, we rushed to the vet. However, we did not get there in time, and the worst happened. I've never seen a family mourn the death of a pet so much. I've seen funerals where the family members did not even shed a single tear for the family member. So, even I ended up a bit heartbroken in a sense, and as much as I regret saying this, I feel like Rebecca and her parents blamed me, even though it all seems like it was an accident that had nothing to do with I. At one point, when we were at the vet's, Rebecca was just, reaching for her mother's arm instead of mine. Which may indicate distrust. Maybe I'm making a conjecture, but I think she believes I did it on purpose because of the whole Kyle thing. Which, I'm saying in front of you, the entire internet, it's completely untrue. Eventually, I'll have to talk to her and come clean. It'll sound cruel that I'll say, but I don't plan on carrying the weight of that secret for 1,000 years. I'll be a better person and confess everything in a few days when the mourning's over. Update number 4. I think I could not have gone better, and if you detect a hint of sarcasm, you may be, right. I'm typing away in the dark and in my room after trying to fall asleep, but it's all to no avail. Rebecca left the house at 4 in the morning. I don't even remember anymore. And I spent the whole day alone trying not to overthink last night. I ended up confessing about Minnie and my involvement in her death, and I pointed out several times that it was not intentional, and gave a detailed cutscene about everything that happened that day. However, things did not go in the right direction because, as the discovery of her little infidelity happened relatively recently, she believes it was deliberate. Just what I feared. She even told me that she had suspected it from the get-go, and her parents supported her in that. Of course, they did not know the motives, but as soon as their daughter said it was me, they jumped on me. And I mean everyone, her family, our friends, and even out of all the yelling that went on, I feel like even the neighbors took side in this, which does not leave me in a very good light. It seemed like a pretty cruel act on his part to not forgive me. I mean, it wasn't malicious since it was my mistake at the worst moment of all, bad timing. But hers was deliberate, so I don't feel there's any point of comparison. Besides, at least I had the initiative to confess my actions, unlike her, who was going to take them to the grave if her cousin did not tell me first. I told her all these things in our discussion, but they caused the opposite effect, and she ended up going to her parents' house in the early hours of the morning, even making some very strong comments, like she was going to sue me for animal abuse. I'm genuinely afraid of that part because it leads to bigger issues, but if so, the only thing I have to do is tell the truth. In a way, I feel that the inevitable has happened. My marriage is ruined. One way or the other, it was not the kissing thing, it's now the pet thing. Could it be the fate was conspiring to tell me that this relationship was unhealthy, toxic? I'm not a big believer in that kind of astrology stuff and so on, but I know that things don't just happen, and eventually everything happens, whether for better or for worse. But trust me when I say, I still feel bad about everything. I even tried to contact Rebecca's cousin, who at first was upset. She even thought that I've done everything on purpose, but nothing could be further from the truth. I insisted and even committed imprudence by showing her the text and update, so she finally believed me. But she seriously doubted that anyone else in the family would do it as well. She also told me to be afraid of what Rebecca might do to me, and that was one of the things that most prompted me to write this update. Just to be clear, it's not about what she might do to me physically. I mean, this so no one goes crazy and starts calling emergency, but about how dangerous Rebecca's tongue can be. According to her cousin, Rebecca tends to turn everyone against the person she dislikes, a behavior that showed up quite a bit in high school. And although I said it was a childish thing, she told me that precisely what I should be most afraid of. Well, She doesn't do it in a childish revenge way. She does it in a sense that can damage my reputation if she feels like it. I hope she's wrong and we can settle all this quietly. I know it's a lot to ask, but we're adults now, and regardless of how this ends, I'm sure divorce papers will be served. Update number 5. I don't want to exaggerate, but I doubt very much that you've been through a story as crazy as this one. I would not wish it on anyone, that's for sure. I divorced Rebecca. Sad thing, I know, but believe me when I tell you it was for the best, and it got to the point where I even had to ask her for a restraining order. Let me elaborate. Since what happened with Minnie, my life has been in complete chaos, and Rebecca has the power to get information out there that even viral internet posts would have respect for. Although she tried to sue me for mistreatment, abuse, and animal murder, the evidence in the end was irrefutable. It was an accident. Also in my favor was the fact that I confessed to my crimes, as I was not going to keep it hidden for years like a certain someone I know. There were quite intense legal battles, as she somehow managed to hire the best lawyer I've ever seen. However, it backfired because after 2 sessions, everything was decided. Everything was kept in the utmost secrecy, but she kept shouting that I've done it for revenge, without elaborating on this point. And it was then that this became a rumor, and before I knew it, half the city already saw and knew me as a dog killer, without knowing the truth behind it. On certain occasions, and I'll never forget this, as it was one of the most humiliating moments of my life. When I went to the market to buy, I noticed how one of the cashiers was talking to the manager, and he came up to me saying that they could not serve me because of the record that I had. I asked him to explain, but before he even let me finish my sentence, he was quickly telling me to cooperate or he would have security come escort me out. Well, that perplexed me, since I swear I didn't do anything wrong. I just went to buy some vegetables, that was it. And the worst part is that a lady who was with her son looked at me with a, very weird face. It was then that I knew that hurting Rebecca was one of the worst things that could do in my life. In the end, I left the place defeated without having done anything to anyone, and although that was the worst situation I've had, it was not an isolated case. There were several instances like that, where even my own family wrote to me, like an aunt who studied veterinarian medicine years ago, who wrote me a very, very long text, saying that she was very disappointed in me, and I'm honest, I feel bad about the dog's death. But I have no hold on the idea that it was an accident so I don't end up in madness. For that very reason, I decided to close my social networks. So many hate messages were in my inbox, it's just too much to bear. One of the messages even said he's going to find me and make me pay. That's when I decided to do something a little more dramatic. You see, I must admit I was not in my right mind at the time. I invited our family to the house for a sort of apology dinner. I knew that if I invited other friends, they were likely to cancel, so I stuck with people close to me. Eventually, this reached Rebecca's ears, so she came along as well, giving the illusion that we were still together. It was the first time I've seen her for days, but there she was, along with other people, without saying a word. The term dinner was an understatement, because as soon as everyone was gathered, I started with a speech. Broaching the subject of Minnie and how sorry I was about it, it was then that Rebecca decides to speak. She starts to insult me, to everyone's surprise, saying that it was a lie, and that I've done it on purpose as revenge, raising her tone higher and higher. That's when my mind kicked in and I said, revenge for what? And she mentioned something that left us all frozen, for sleeping with Kyle before our wedding. And it turns out that even her cousin did not know the whole story. According to what she said in the discussion, not only had she made out with Kyle, but they've done it all the way down. And that was a reason enough for me to have done what I've done. I just said that if that had been the case, I would have taken revenge a long time ago and not waited for such a moment. It was then that many people agreed with me. Gradually, the matter began to cool down, and among the whispers I heard that despite everything, Rebecca admits having committed a wrong, while I still deny that I did it with malice. That was reason enough for me during the divorce discussions to have the appropriate witnesses. They corroborated all the facts. My reputation is still a bit tarnished, but little by little the truth has been coming out. With my family being a support network and relaying the messages in every new post where I'm accused of being a dog killer. Well, to end this story, at least for now, I just have to say, be careful with your pets. I'm not lying when I tell you that I still feel bad about little Minnie, and that I would never look for a way to get back at a person like that. What's more, there's no such thing that is revenge in me. What happened in the public discussion with Rebecca and I was one thing to clear up, and her putting the noose around her neck was not my problem at all. Now, I just want to rest because the divorce is finalized and I have the house to myself. I don't know what movie to watch, but eventually I'll find something interesting. So I think this is hilarious how this story ended. OP's wife basically just tells on herself by jumping into the family argument and saying, you know what, you're just doing revengeance for what you did to my dog because I did stuff with your friend right before we got married. Guys, I do feel very terrible though for the dog. I mean, that is very tragic, but it's crazy that the family thinks that OP would do that on purpose. It was clearly an accident, but hey, that is the part of the story that sucks so bad. Let me know your thoughts though. If you were in OP's position, what would you have done differently? Drop your comments down below. I hope you guys are having a great day. If you're new to the channel, my name is Mr. Reddito. I narrate stories every day. I hope to see you guys tomorrow, and just remember one thing, it's cool to be kind. See ya.